Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is day 37 since the Hamas attacks on southern Israel. Today is Sunday, November 12th. I wanted to talk for just a few minutes today about the Book of Esther. I have the privilege of worshiping this morning with the United Methodist Church in Edmonds. I've committed to speaking to as many churches as possible, mostly church groups, but we're willing to talk to any other groups as well. Today, I'm on my way back to Washington, D.C., and the passage I want to talk to you about is from the Book of Esther. I've been talking a lot about the Book of Esther. In the Book of Esther, Haman, who was an official of King Xerxes, desired to annihilate all of the Jewish people. And I want to talk about that. For many Jews in Israel and around the world, they've been taught their entire life that people are trying to kill them. And October 7th was further evidence of that reality, of the reality that anti-Semitism is alive and well. And we see that in the Book of Esther. We see that throughout history. October 7th was the exclamation mark on the end of that sentence. If you look in the Book of Esther in chapter 3, Haman says to King Xerxes, "There is a certain people dispersed among the peoples in the provinces of your kingdom who keep themselves separate. Their customs are different from those of all other people, and they do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. But if it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them, and I will give 10,000 talents of silver to the king's administrators, to the royal treasury." So the king ends up issuing an order for the Jews to be annihilated. And he says, keep the money, do with it as you will, and do with the people as you please. And the text of the edict is to be issued. It's to be made known to all the people of every nationality so that they would be ready for when the day came. And chapter 4 continues and begins with the story of Mordecai. And he's learning about what had been done, and he tears his clothes and puts on sackcloth and ashes, and he goes to the city, and he only gets as far as the king's gate because no one clothed in sackcloth is allowed to enter. And then Esther's eunuchs and the female attendants come and talk to her about Mordecai and his distress. And she sends clothes for him to put on, but he doesn't accept them. And Mordecai ends up in a conversation with Esther back and forth. And I just want to read a couple of those verses. Mordecai's words, he says to Esther, "Do you not think that because you are in the king's house alone, that you of all the Jews will escape? For if you remain silent during this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to a royal position for just such a time as this." And Esther sends this reply back to Mordecai: "Go gather together all the Jews who are in Susha and fast for me. Do not think or eat for 3 days, night or day, and I and my attendants will fast along with you. And when this is done, I will go to the king. And even though this is against the law, if I perish, I will perish." And Esther goes to the king, and she finds favor with the king, and she becomes a savior of all the Jewish people. And the reason I thought it was so profound to share this story is that we have to understand what's happening right now in light of the history of the Jewish people. And we have to understand right now in light of what's happening, in light of the history of the Palestinian people. And I think we have a lot to learn from Esther. I was so struck by the words of Mordecai: "For if you are silent in this time, relief and deliverance will come from another place." And so might we not be silent at this time? Might we call for an end to the bombing of Gaza? Today, the death toll is more than 11,000 people, more than 4,500 children. Our work is so critical at this moment. We can have empathy and a deep, deep grief for Jewish people who lost so much on October 7th, for Jewish people who are suffering and grieving and who are in fear. We can advocate for a ceasefire and for human rights for Palestinians, and call for an end to the bombing of Gaza. We can advocate for Hamas to pay the consequences of their own actions without civilians in Gaza having to pay the price. We can advocate for peace and justice for both people while acknowledging differentials of power, calling for an end to war, in recognizing the image of God, Imago Dei, in Palestinians and Israelis, and in calling for an end to this horrific war.